Hey folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio. Thanks to all of you who've been tuning in. And as you know, here on my channel, it's all Beatle talk. I talk to lots of people in the Beatle world, Beatle authors, Beatle podcasters, people who have worked with the Beatles. And we have a very special guest, as we always do, on the program this time. And it's no stranger to most of you, Mark Lapidos, who ever since 1974 has been doing the Fest for Beatles Fans, formerly known as Beatlefest. Welcome, Mark, tonight to
Hey,
my
Ken, how
channel.
you doing?
Let it be. What is that exactly?
I don't know. It's something somebody's working on. I'm not sure. I don't know if it'll work.
I think it's a Rolling Stones album, actually.
Could be, yes.
Yeah.
You can get the L in there. There's an L for this. You can get the extra E and come up with a D, and you're all set.
There you go. So I thought since we have you as a guest here on the show this time, we would do a lot of talking about the fest through the years. It's a remarkable thing that you've been doing this almost every year since 1974. And I just wanted to go back to the very beginning because I wanted to know when it all started. Did you have a vision exactly of what you wanted it to be? Because it's become something for everybody type of event. So many different features throughout the fest, everything from special guests on stage, panel discussions, performances, Beatles sound-alike shows to a puppet show, but in the very beginning, what were you thinking about? What exactly did you want it to be?
Well, the idea, as you know, came to me over a dish of vanilla ice cream on the Upper East Side. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Of New York at the end of 1973, and I just came up with the idea of the fest. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I got something in my throat. Sorry.
That's all right.
It happens.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm ready. So I just had the word Beatlefest just popped into my head, and I had this idea, and it just like I'm looking at it, and in my head, I'm saying, okay, well, let's get a fans convention for the 10th anniversary of the Beatles' arrival in America, and we'll have music and guests and stories and audio presentations and vendors, and just have a hotel full of people and doing lots of different activities. And art museum, I guess that was one of the things that I had in mind. And it sat in my head for a few months until I decided to go ahead and book the hotel and sent Beatles letters. And obviously on April 28th, 74, I met with John and told him the whole idea, pretty much what was in my head that day. And that's when he said, I'm all for it. I'm a Beatles fan too. And that day changed my life.
I'm sure.
It completely changed my life. He said, just come back on Tuesday and we'll get you all set up.
Okay. And
I came back on Tuesday.
You had the cooperation of all four Beatles in sending something for charity, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, they all sent, and it was John who helped get that all together. In fact, a week before the show, Vice President of Apple in America, Tony King, had called me and said, did you get all the items from all the Beatles? He said, only Ringo. So John called up Paul and George and said, how come you didn't send anything to the Beatlefest? He said, we didn't know. So John made it happen that week and got instruments from both of them. And John, as he told me in person, I have a guitar in my attic, I'll get it and sign it for you. And he did.
That's great. So from the very beginning, all four of them were aware of the fest.
Yes, they were. Yes. When Carol and I met Paul and Linda in 76, the weekend after the day after their show in Paris, we saw them at a cow palace or something.
Mm-hmm.
It was a tinder block, and I'm amazed that we survived.
Yeah.
But we were in the very first row right in front of Paul, and we got to meet him at the hotel, George Sank. And we told him all about the fest, and he apparently knew about it, and he said, keep me informed.
That's great.
Nice little tour.
Yeah, that's the photo that's on the website, right?
That's the photo that's on the website, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you also have a photo of you and Carol with Yoko.
Yes, yeah, we met Yoko many times, and she's
Mhm.
terrific, and she's been supportive of the show ever, in 40 years already.
Yeah.
Um, we did a Romanian Angel Appeal thing. We worked with Olivia's sister Linda, and
Mhm.
that was very successful. We dedicated a whole night in LA for it in 1990. Yeah, 1990, and I think Barbara's sister also was part of that, if I remember correctly.
Sure.
Helped a lot. And
Yeah. All the
so
Beatles wives.
yes, and then Harry was able, Harry Nilsson was able to get all the Beatles, Paul, George, and Ringo's autographs on the Sgt. Pepper albums for Gun Control.
Right.
He told me the story that those albums traveled all around the world a number of times trying to get them all signed,
Wow.
but he did.
That's amazing.
Yes.
There's also a photo there of you and Carol with Ringo, and that's fairly recent, right?
That was about 5 years ago, yeah. But we had met him very briefly back in the 70s. And George, I had a nice long conversation with George. Of all of them, I had the longest conversation when he was when he was being sued by A&M Records. He wanted to get out of the contract.
Yep.
So he could put his records out on Warner Brothers. And I'm sitting in at the trial. George is there. It was in a courtroom in LA. And during the break, I guess lunch break, everybody went their own way, and George just hung out right outside the courtroom. So I went over and started talking to him, and told him, if you need a character witness, we need your music out. It can't be delayed anymore.
Right.
The 33 and a third album
Right.
was in question, but then we started talking Beatles, and I invited him to the show. He said, I would love to be there, but I'm going to be on Saturday Night Live that weekend with Paul Simon. But I've already arranged to we made 3 promotional films. I've already arranged to have them sent to you. And then he said, if you want, we have in his office, a big mosaic, I forgot what it's called, but it's a big, it's on the site somewhere.
Right.
That's sitting in his office, a 7-headed horse, a Krishna kind of thing.
Right.
And he said, if you can arrange to pick it up, you can use it for the weekend. And we
Okay.
had it in the art museum. And the funny thing is, Carol took a picture of it, and this guy was standing next to him. It's next to the piece. He wasn't posing. He just happened to be right there. And we later found out it was Olivia's father, who came to her family came to the fest. And actually, somewhere in the last 10 years, Michelle and Tilly saw Danny in New York. I guess he was playing somewhere, and they got together, and they showed him the picture. They had him with them. They said, "That's my grandfather." So so I had a great talking music and trivia, and I wish I could have remembered all the things I said, but it was just good. It was wonderful.
It's kind of ironic that you were there in the courtroom. You should have been in the This Song video.
Well, if they would have made it that day, yes, but I don't think
it was already done.
While the judge was actually in presiding over the case.
Yeah,
but it was so sweet. He was so nice, and we just talking like two like guys talking. It was just like the nicest thing. And he was sitting there, he was standing there smoking cigarettes, and we know where that led, unfortunately. But, they grew up in a different time.
Now, you've also had the fest in Chicago. When exactly did that start? Was that around the same time?
77. Well, the show was a one convention idea.
Yeah,
it never even occurred to me that it was going to be a career. It's just the first show was a complete sellout, with jammed, packed to the rafters, and it made the cover story of Rolling Stone. And I was actually interviewed by the New York Times on Saturday, and it was in the Sunday paper that day of the second day of the fest, the 2-day fest. So on Sunday morning, September 8th, 74, while the fest is going on, it's a big page 3 of the New York Times was a big interview with me. It was like, wow, holy. And Joel Siegel, if you remember him,
right? Sure.
He's the one who did the story for Rolling Stone. and that ended up on the cover of Rolling
Yeah.
Stone. And so we started getting, I guess, letters or calls from all over the country saying, bring it here, do it again, do it again.
Mm.
So I decided to do it again in 75, and then we expanded from there.
Yeah, Joel was a huge Beatle fan, and
Yeah.
you couldn't ask for better publicity than that. I mean,
How
74, how
can
many?
you, how can you get a big cover of Rolling Stone?
Yeah.
And it was a cover of Melody Maker. Chris Charlesworth.
Uh-huh.
The week before the fest, he said, we may have created the Beatles here, but it's taken American ingenuity to come up with a Beatles convention. See full story next week.
Mhm.
And that was on the cover as a teaser.
Right.
So those were, so Melody Maker was the #1 paper in England, as far as I was concerned, because you could buy it at Fifth Avenue, New York City. And Rolling Stone, obviously, you know what that is. So, that was, when you get the best publicity you'll ever get,
Mhm.
it was wonderful. And then we did it and we're still doing it in Chicago. It's 40 from 77. It's 44 years. And LA, we did 25 years in LA also.
Wow. That's really
We
something.
booked Chicago in on the way back from the LA and San Francisco Fest in 76. Carol and I drove. It was her 1973 Chevelle. We drove cross country listening to cassettes, Beatles cassettes. I remember ELO, the double album.
Oh yeah,
year,
Out of the Blue.
Out of the Blue,
Yeah.
and Dark Side of the Moon. It's like we had a couple of cassettes. That's what we listened to
Uh-huh.
both ways. And on the way back, we stopped in Chicago, where we stayed at this Howard Johnson's on Lake Michigan, and it was well below freezing with 20-mile-an-hour winds.
Mhm.
After coming from California, which was nice and warm. And we found the Palmer House. We went into Palmer House, first hotel we went into, and we booked it and got in the car and left. Didn't want to see anything else. It was much too cold for my blood.
Mm.
We were there for 4 years.
In 74, what was the attendance? Do you remember how many people showed up?
It was probably pretty close to 7,000 or 8,000 people.
Uh-huh.
We long lost count, but that's what it says on the film walk in the Pepperland. But it was capacity. It was absolute full capacity, as we had in 2014. You were there.
Yep.
You saw that same ballroom. That was without the balcony. They took the balcony down.
Yeah.
But it was as many as you could fit. That was it.
How did you go through the process of trying to decide where to run it in New York?
I went to hotels to look.
No, but I mean, were there any specific ones that you had in mind, or just you went from one to another?
There weren't that many big hotels in New York.
Mm.
I went to, I guess, the hotel across in the Garden, whatever it was called then, because it kept changing names. The Statler Hilton, maybe originally. The newer, was pretty new, the Hilton on 54th Street, the Americana Hotel.
Uh-huh.
So, there weren't, Roosevelt probably I looked at. I'm just guessing because I looked at them later on after the Commodore Hotel closed down. So we couldn't do a show in 76. Just closed it down and someone bought the building and made it a Hyatt.
Right.
Where we ended up many years later. But I guess I liked the way it looked. I liked the balcony. I liked the feel of the ballroom, and that everything on one floor. And I guess they gave me a good deal.
Yeah.
What I didn't know anything about negotiating contracts for hotel. Those you walk in cold and you get what you get. But I signed it, plopped down my own money. I didn't borrow any money from anybody else. My savings from Sam Goody. And then I started working on it after meeting John. I booked it in January, and then I put a two-line ad in the Village Voice. Beatlefest, anyone interested? Send SASE to P.O. Box 78 in River Edge, New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
And we got about 300-400 responses in 3 days.
Okay. Was that the only publicity you had prior to
That was the first public announcement.
Yeah.
That's historical in terms of a business. Your first public announcement using that name.
Right.
So that was it. But I mean, to get so many for information,
Right.
I was blown away. I figured I'd get 10, 20 of them. Who knew? But a whole bag full of mail.
Uh-huh.
One little $14 ad in Village Voice. So that was cool. And then I started going to concert, in concerts. I'd hand out little flyers maybe, and I ran into people who said, "Oh, I want to help you." So people started helping, and PR people. I met a lot of people that a number of people that I came to the fest and knew them for a long time.
Yeah.
Still do.
And how did you decide upon the Meadowlands Hilton, where it ran for so many years in
Um,
New Jersey?
the Americana, which we did in '79. That had the biggest ballroom in New York, and that's when we had Klaus Vormann as a guest the first time. And it changed ownership 3 days before we moved in, before the fest. The new people were not big. They were not the same people as the other people, and they just gave us a hard time, I guess. I guess they just didn't like us kind, maybe,
Uh-huh.
Then I said, it's very expensive to do the hotel and to do host shows in New York City. I'm from Jersey. Why don't I look for a Jersey hotel? So it's just right, almost right across the river, 4 miles outside of Manhattan, out of the Lincoln Tunnel. This beautiful hotel. So we took over the entire hotel, and that's where we were from 80 till it fell down, basically. 2015.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was our home there, and you saw how jammed it was. The lobby was a small entrance, and to get into the ballroom was tight. But we managed, and everyone had a great time, and it was our home. We had an overflow hotel, a couple of them, because we couldn't fit everybody there who wanted to stay. And but we loved it there, But then we're in Florida watching TV, and it says in New Jersey, the hotel, a parking lot incident has happened where it's collapsed partially from snow removal. And I look up to Carol. That's the hotel we're supposed to be at in 2 months. And we got there, and the marketplace, which is you remember under the
Sure.
garage, there was a lot of damage to it, and the firemen were there, and they said, "This is not looking good with the hotel." I said, "Don't worry, Mark, we'll get it right. You'll have it." I said, "It's less than 2 months away." Didn't work, and so we were really lucky to find that hotel up in Rye-Town. I forgot what it's called. The Hilton.
Yeah.
Hilton Westchester.
Yeah.
And that's also now closed down. That's no longer a hotel.
I love that hotel, as a matter of
They
fact.
had the same. That was cool. That was they had the whole weekend open. That same weekend. That's like a 1 in a million chance. Because all you need is one meeting on a Saturday afternoon for 100 people for whatever, and that messes up the whole availability. So that was really nice. And then we found a new home at Hyatt Regency Jersey City, which is a gorgeous place. It's a 21st century hotel, and the hotel looks like a cruise ship jutting out into the Hudson River, directly across from the One World Trade.
I know, it's a beautiful view.
It is, and again, we have the entire hotel, and it's newer, it's nice, it's beautiful. So there's the history of hotels. Ta-da! And we missed the last 2 years. We had to postpone them, of course, in both cities. It's very hard. It's very hard to do that. It was really difficult, especially the last one in October, when it was looking pretty good for a while, and then this Delta variant came and screwed it up, and so we got dates for April. And April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, we're gonna see you all there. People are so excited. The hotel couldn't roll over the rooms for 4 shows in a row. They were closed for a year. They lost track. Mark, I'm sorry, you have to have everybody rebook them. So we told everybody, you have one day to rebook them until we tell everybody else you can rebook them. And the response is 90% of the rooms sold in the first 3 days. That tells me people really want to go. And such a small percentage of people canceled their tickets for various reasons. But overwhelming majority, I think 90%, over 90%, held on to their tickets. Just like we had tickets for Elton John for April of 2020. I think they moved it to February of 2022 that we still have tickets for it.
Right.
You know, I'm sure lots of people did for all the Billy Joel concerts. We all did. We had tickets, and you just hold on to them. And then we just made the announcement this past Sunday. And if you get our mailings, it's on the way. See, so that's where your name will be on there with customer number.
Okay.
I didn't get mine yet, so I would expect today people will start getting their catalog today, tomorrow, and Saturday.
You know, so many people out there have been wondering what you've been going through these last couple of years, and from one fest to another, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And not knowing to the last moment. And it must have been so difficult for you to make these decisions. And in the end, you made all the right ones. So
thank you. Well, we made the decision based on the fact that a majority of the audience is our first generation fans, and we were the most susceptible to COVID. And there wasn't a vaccine in 2020.
Right.
So there was no question that we couldn't have it that year. But we had two really nice, actually 3 Zoom events. We did
I know.
Chicago. We did a full one. I don't know how Tilly did it. Set up, it's like 5 different rooms at one time. And Terry Hemmett was our MC. It was like we had so many guests, and we did it for John's birthday last year, and then we did it for George's birthday this year. And but it's really hard to put them on. I'm glad we did it. I have no regrets about it, and it keeps people at least connected. And you know, it's a community we have that we've built over all these years, and you know, unfortunately, some of the people can't come because they're no longer with us.
Yeah.
You know, you keep getting, you get calls every once in a while. Please send me refund. My husband passed, and my wife passed, and some of it was COVID. Most of it wasn't, luckily, but there were COVID cases that people died from. You know, and once the vaccine hit, it's gone down, luckily, but still, not everyone's getting vaccinated. But the kids, my grandnieces, got their shots within 24 hours last week after it was available.
Good.
They were so excited to get them, and that's what I think is happening right now. That I think I heard this morning about 1 million kids have gotten vaccinated in the first 2 days or so. So, go kids!
Yes.
Show us the way. It's your generation next.
So I thought that I'd run by a list of some of the people, some of the many incredible guests that you've had in all these years. And I know that you've told me upon occasion that you're usually so busy running around during the fest, making sure that it runs smoothly, that you don't get as much time as you'd like to spend with these special guests to get to know them. But if you have gotten to know any of them fairly well, or any memories that you want to share about them specifically from that time they were there, and maybe you've built friendships, strong friendships with some of these people too over the years.
Indeed. Yes.
So I'm just going to run by a list of some of these people, and you can share with the folks watching, you know, your thoughts about all
Out
these
there?
very
Sure.
yes. Let's start. So many great.
Give me a name. Give me a name.
Billy Preston.
Never heard of him. He's no. Billy Preston was way up there on our all-time best guests. He was so positive when he was on stage. Every question was with a laugh, and guys, it was so good. It was what an honor it was. What a privilege. It was like he exuded excitement and about his experience. And we learned more. We had him back in I want to say 87, maybe a long time ago. No, before that we had him. I can't remember the first year we had him. I have all the books I can check, but he was a guest probably a dozen times over the years in different cities. As his health declined, the last time he did the show was you were there, I'm sure, in 2005, I think, or 2006. He was very ill, and his agent said, I don't know if he can come down. He was supposed to, he had his band with him because he was going to Europe to do, Germany to do one gig. And she told me that he's not feeling well enough. I don't know if he's gonna feel well enough to come down. So why don't you come up and talk to him? So I went up to the room, and he's in bed, and he didn't look so good. He had a kid, I think it was kidney, or that he was waiting for.
He was on dialysis.
Dialysis, right? So he was waiting for a new kidney.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said, I'll come down, but he really didn't look good. And right before, it was an afternoon concert with his band, and he's sitting behind stage, and he's sitting backstage, and my brother-in-law was a doctor, was sitting right next to him, and he told me later that there's no way this guy's going to get up those 4 steps to get to the stage. And what happened next is probably the most miraculous thing that's ever happened at a fest. I guess my brother-in-law helped him up the first 3 steps. He gets to the top step, and he leaps onto the steps and goes over to the piano, keyboard that he had, and gave the performance of a lifetime. And he must have known that this was going to be it for him, because nobody believed it. Nobody. This has never happened at a fest. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It was like a 40-minute set. You were there, right? I'm sure you.
Yep.
Yeah. It was absolutely amazing. Here was this guy who could hardly get out of bed 20 minutes earlier, is giving a show, and it's like he's giving it 500%. It's absolutely amazing. And when he comes off the stage, he's holding on to me and Carol. We're walking down the hallway to get to his booth so he could sign autographs. And it never happened before with any other guest. People coming up to him and were just like, I can't believe what you just did. I mean, they didn't know he was sick. They didn't know how ill he is. And they were just coming up to him, fans, and say, Billy, that was the greatest thing. It was absolutely sensational. Thank you so much for being here. And they were crowding us like we're walking with Paul McCartney. You couldn't move. And he was just, smiling, but he was holding on to us. And this guy, and he collapsed the next day, and we went to the hospital next door, but he died, I think, less than a year later. But what a powerful performance that was. And his agent, nobody knows how that happened, but it just, something came over him. And that was like one of the greatest moments we've ever experienced. And then to this day, we've had Donovan, we've had Klaus Woman. They don't come around. That was the greatest thing I ever saw,
Yeah.
And they were terrific, but this was something magical. And he must have felt it, because the vibes he sent, people were affected by it.
He's really an amazing performer, whether you had seen him at a solo show, whether he's accompanying Ringo in the All-Stars, the Rolling Stones, whoever, but he just lights up the room. Oh, the George Harrison tour of 1974, as much as I love George, when Billy was on stage dancing around doing his hit records, it was such a high moment of the show.
I saw all those shows in New York, two in the city, 2 in the Nassau Coliseum.
Yeah.
Was there all 4?
I was at, one at the Nassau Coliseum, but I'm sure glad that I went, because it's the only time I ever got to see George live. So, yeah. And I'm not sure if this is the last time he ever performed, but I went to an oldie show, one of Bowser's shows, which he puts on throughout the year, at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. And Billy was one of the acts, and he was phenomenal. And he knew about me and my wife, and we wanted to talk to him after the show and maybe do an interview, but he was way too weak after the show. But he talked to everybody. But I also wanted to bring this up because there was the show that we saw of Ringo and the All-Stars at the Concord Hotel in New York City. And we had,
Upstate New York.
yeah, um, we had talked to Billy, inviting him to our hotel room, and he said, yeah, what number is it, whatever. We thought he's not going to show up. And late at night, a knock is on the door, and he's there, and he's jamming with Beatle fans in our hotel room.
But he did that
And
with us too. He was in,
yeah,
in our parties.
yeah, sure. What a
Yeah.
great guy.
We had to miss that. We had passes for that show, and we were going to meet Ringo that night. But
Uh-huh.
unfortunately, there was an car accident involving Carol's parents, and Jessica was in the car as a little child.
Wow.
Nobody, I mean, she wasn't hurt, but her mother was hurt a little bit. So we couldn't go.
Hmm.
And but we had all it was all planned out. Concord Hotel. I grew up in the Catskills, so I
Sure.
know every inch of that hotel. My uncle was a maitre d' there for the entire time that the hotel was in business, 60 years.
Oh, wow.
Those were the days. So that's all. Lots of different stories. The only time a Beatle played in the Catskills.
Yeah. I sure am glad I went to that. In fact, my
Yeah.
son, one of my sons is a musician who's written hundreds of songs. And one of them he played to Billy. Billy never heard the song in his life, and he's harmonizing to my son's song. You know what a thrill that is, and what a memory to take
Yeah.
with you? Huh.
Yeah. I mean, look what happened at the Let It Be sessions.
Yeah,
He walks in and it's a different vibe.
right.
And he picked up, you read the book and you see, you read the Get Back book already?
Yeah.
It's they transpose everything. It's wonderful. What a great book.
Mhm.
But you get, there's something going on. It's like what he's adding to it, besides the harmony of the four guys, the harmony of the song, and adding pieces to the song, and he oozed. He was a child prodigy.
Yeah.
We know that.
It's
It's just
kind of
very-
like Olivia Harrison said, he knows exactly what to play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
He just had that sense, and musicians do.
Mm.
It's not too many of them, but we know a couple of them. Who knows how to play exactly what to play better than Ringo and George and
Oh,
Paul,
yeah.
in terms of instruments,
Mm.
And on All My Love, and John too, he was
Yep.
a rhythm guitarist, but what he put in All My Lovin',
I'm glad Paul's been talking about that lately.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not that easy to play. Very fast.
I've
2 minutes.
tried it. I can't. No, you can't. No,
Mm.
and yeah, that I only started reading that book. I read the first 2 songs. The first one is All My Lovin', so
Mhm.
I got that story, and so I got a lot of other things to do, like running the holiday catalog and stuff like that. We're getting more guests, by the way, for the show.
Good.
So,
Good.
yeah.
We'll talk about all the guests at the end of our conversation. But you
Sure.
must bring up Harry Nilsson. What your memories are.
Harry, Harry. Well, besides meeting him when I met John, he's the one who opened the door.
Mm.
Of which we have on a Betamax tape somewhere, that in LA, he describes my knocking on the door and him opening the door. He's doing a parody of me. Hi, I'm John. Right in. But we have that on tape. He did that. Yeah, we got involved with Harry. After John was assassinated, we started raising money for gun control. Unbeknownst to us, he became the national spokesperson for the what it was called then, the National Coalition to Ban Handguns. And we met up in LA at his house, and you hear stories about Harry, right? How he was he was the sharpest person you'll ever meet.
Mm.
Sharpest, the wit. That's why he and all the Beatles were pals, because they all had sharp wits.
Right.
But he was really intelligent and sharp-witted, and he would test you. You want to be a friend of his, he would test you. So we walk into his house in Beverly Hills, and he's wearing the robe that he wore up on the roof, Only You, the promotional film.
Okay.
He's wearing that very robe. And this was just after Popeye came out.
Okay.
So I would seen the movie and I enjoyed it. You know, Klaus was in it and Robin Williams was wonderful in it.
Hysterical.
You know, hysterical. So I said, I love the music and I love the movie. He said, I hated it. Already, he's putting us on the defensive right there. But that was Harry. So we had a great conversation after that. And he came to, I don't know how many fests, I lost track, but he came to almost every fest from then till 93, till he was too weak to come. But every time he moved, he lived in New York area. He lived in New Rochelle for a while. He lived in Piermont, not Piermont, the one north of Piermont, where the theater is.
Terrytown?
No, on this side of the Hudson. Where then you East Nyack.
Okay.
So on the river.
Okay.
So he had a beautiful home right on the river. He must like water because his home in New Rochelle was also on the inlet.
Hmm.
So, but each time we get together at his new house, he'd have another kid. And but we would just he was a dear friend. I mean, it was just like tops. And then the things he would do on stage, showing off his how sharp he was. It's okay, everybody. I'm not sure if he did this in New York ever. He must have. So okay, yell out some Beatles songs. I'll play all these songs and put them together like it's the same song. You'll know, you won't know the difference. People calling out 5, 6, 7, 8 songs, and they wrote them down. Okay, okay, guys, Drew, get ready. We're starting in whatever key. Boom. And he starts going from one song to the other, like a medley, but it was like one song. You wouldn't know it was a different song. And right off the top of his head, the whole we were flabbergasted. I remember the first time he did it was in L.A. And that was a giant ballroom. We must have had 2,500 people in the room at one time. It was just phenomenal to watch. And of course, we always ended up with "Hey Jude" right at the end of the concert.
Yeah.
And Harry was the artist who never performed. That's the rock star who never played in public. At the fest, he played many, many times. And then after one show, "Hey Jude" comes on, it's over, and Harry walks back on stage and says, "I'm not done." So the guys got back on stage and he did a few more songs till he was ready to leave, but he took over. And who was going to stop him? Only I wasn't going to stop him, and nobody else is there. It's my show, right? So
yeah,
just let it go. You know, let Harry do his thing. And the first time I remember with Jimmy Fink, in Jersey, Harry's after this. It was after the show, like Saturday night, and he's up in the little where the band played upstairs outside the art museum, the little area, and you know, he's there to raise money for gun control. And Jimmy said, "I'll give you $20 right now if you play Remember," because he had never performed that. So there's only like maybe a dozen of us sitting there.
Yeah.
Remember on the piano. Remember. It was so magical. I think he did it on stage at some point after that. Not that weekend, but at Future Fest, because he just got up and played. He did a lot of his songs.
Yeah.
But that was very special. Just like a few of us witnessed that.
You know, you're talking about the medley. It's reminding me of when he did the "You Can't Do That" medley.
Yeah, right.
It's pretty much the same thing.
It is, except this he did that. They worked out ahead of time, right?
Right.
This was right off the top. Boom.
Yeah.
And it was just, I got to find the tapes for these things. I know I have them somewhere.
You know, I often say that medley, which he did on Pandemonium Shadow Show, I think that was really pretty ahead of its time, because we hadn't really heard medleys like that and done so well. They all flowed together so well. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's what caught the Beatles' eye. You know, they when they became friends. You know. He knew. Harry knew, and Harry became one of the inner circle long before we knew about that he was in the inner circle.
Ringo called him his best friend.
Yeah.
And I
Oh, yeah.
sometimes wonder, compared to the other Beatles, he placed them higher. But from what I understand, Ringo said he'd give you the shirt off his back. So
Yes.
that's
Harry was working on him. He said, Mark, I'm really close. I want to get Ringo down here. He was trying to get Ringo to the fest. Just didn't work out.
Yeah. All right. How about Doris Troy?
Doris Troy only made it to one fest. We
Right.
had a schedule for the Chicago show, but she fell ill, and I think she passed away that same year, maybe, or the next year. Wasn't long after. She was very sweet. I didn't have many long conversations with her, but she was very outgoing and friendly, and she just talked about her experiences on stage. But I don't have insight except for the fact that she sang. She did Just One Look, and she did a couple other tracks as an Apple artist. And Liverpool backed them as they backed all our guests over the years.
Yeah.
She was very sweet, but I didn't have a chance to really, because there was only one show. So if she came to Chicago, we probably would have had a dinner together the night before, like we try to do with our guests, have some time with them, which was always very pleasant.
Yeah. I can't say enough, by the way, about the band Liverpool, because, apart from when they perform just as the band itself, they're phenomenal. But when they back up all these other artists and do it so well, I mean, some of the music is actually very complicated. And one of the artists I wanted to bring up was Ronnie Spector.
Ronnie Spector, great.
And
here's my favorite, one of my favorite stories. Ronnie Spector wanted to do rehearsal with the band. So on, I guess, Friday afternoon, she's doing rehearsal. And the first song she does is Be My Baby. First take, after the song is over, she turned around and looked at the guy and says, "You guys sounded just like the record." I mean, they had all the harmonies.
Right.
And they had it down perfect. And she was so, I mean, here's an artist, a very top artist, and playing with all big names of her whole career. And she's playing with these guys she never met. And she says, "You guys sound just like the record." And she was so impressed. And I don't know how many songs she did. She did more than 2, I think. I think she kept.
Oh,
she did a couple extra.
She did a fairly decent set.
Yeah.
But what impressed me, Mark, was Try Some Buy Some.
Yes.
That is a very difficult song to perform. There's all these different time signature changes and stuff. And Liverpool really did well. I mean,
I told Ronnie, I said, "You have to do Try Some Buy Some."
Yeah.
So she said, "Okay, I'll do it." Because I don't think she did that in her regular sets usually.
I've seen her in concert. She almost always only performs the end of the year because she's so well known for the Christmas stuff.
Christmas, right.
And she's not going to do Try Some Buy Some during
because
that time.
Nobody could learn it. Nobody could do it with her.
Yeah.
But Liverpool did. Yeah, that was a great moment. Yes. That was a great moment. But the moment in the rehearsal was better for us, because to hear the band that we know and love back, you sound like the record. This record, one of the greatest records of all. Brian Wilson, the greatest song of all time, "Be My Baby," right? He's pretty well known, Brian Wilson, right?
Yeah.
And but that was a great moment. And Ronnie,
did you get to know her? Did you get to know her?
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, her manager, her second husband, said, "Please, whatever you do on stage, whoever, I guess was it Jimmy Fink or was it Ken by then? No, it was Ken. It was in the 2000s. Yeah, it was 2008.
Yeah.
Ken Dashow. Whatever you do, don't mention Phil Spector." And Ken would say, "Okay, well, tell us about your recording." And Phil Spector did this. She couldn't stop talking about it. And her husband was going, she told stories out of that had never been heard before. There were some of those fresh stories that became part of her life. But she told them on stage. She didn't hold back. We were all stunned. Stunned.
Yes. And shocked.
Okay, nobody, her husband, what can he do? what can you do?
Yeah.
But that was unexpected and terrific because it was her life. She's
Yeah.
she can talk. She's allowed to tell about her life.
And she's still a terrific performer.
She is, yes, yes.
You know, for someone who only performs the end of the year,
Yeah,
you know,
we
you
saw
got to
her
keep
the
at
other
it
day.
with your voice. So she still sounds great.
She does, yes. And she told that story about, I guess I don't remember if it was known then, but it was her ticket that Phil Spector used. He told her Phil wanted to be on the plane coming
Oh,
over.
yeah. Okay.
I don't
I
know if
didn't
that was
realize that.
known. I can't. But Ronnie was in England, and Phil wanted to go back on the Beatles flight, and Ronnie happened to have a ticket, and he said, "You have to go back to New York today." This was like the day before, and you have to go into the studio. And there was nothing for her to do. There was just he made that up, so he could use her tickets. In those days, folks, you could use anybody's ticket. Doesn't matter. There was no security, and so in '64, he came off with the Beatles, and it was Ronnie's seat. And I think that's I can't swear to it, but I think that was told on. I know it was told on the stage, but I don't know if it was ever known before that. You'd have to research it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Next.
Next. Well, I got to tell you, because this also ties in with a very special moment for me in my career, and that's Peter and Gordon, who I had the chance to interview because I was working both at the ABC Radio Network and at XM Radio at the time. I was on two different channels on XM Radio, and Peter and Gordon had gotten together for a benefit for Mike Smith of the Day Clark Five, who was in, So I got to go on stage and introduce some of the acts who were there. But before that, I got to interview Peter and Gordon together. What a highlight of my career that's been, as well as Denny Lane, the Zombies, who I'd never interviewed, Colin and Rod. And so, but Peter and Gordon performed at the fest too. I guess shortly after that was.
It was about a year later. We had Gordon at the fest a couple of times. So I went over and talked to him. I said, why don't you guys do a whole show at the fest? He said, Mark, I'm in. Got to talk to Peter. So we had all the guests for the next show. It was the next show. And Carol said to me, I guess like in January of that year, said, why don't you call Peter? See if you can get them together. Because that was a one-off thing. They had no plan to do it again. So I said, okay. So I listened to Carol and I called Peter, and he said, tell me why you think I should do this. Give you 5 minutes to tell me why. Yeah. And I'll give you my answer tomorrow. So I gave him why I think he should do it. And he called me back the next day. He said, Mark, you made a hard bargain. I accept your offer, and we'll do it. And to me, I think that, it was nice to do the one-off show, but once he started doing these, they were going to do, we had him we had Peter and Gordon at the next few shows. So they did it as together. And then unfortunately, Gordon passed away, but that started Peter's next career as going out and doing shows. And, I was happy to be part of that historical thing, and having Peter and Gordon on our stage in Vegas was the first one, if I remember correctly. And Drew was telling me we have the keyboard from Liverpool. So Mark, we have to get some extra musicians. We have to get a tuba player. I said, whatever you need, just do it. And it was wonderful. It was a little issue. Peter's a perfectionist, and he deserves to be one. And that's he's terrific, but he likes things certain ways. And somehow in the rehearsal, the last group took up too much time. And so Peter called the meeting. He said, why wasn't the stage ready for us? And I said, it's my fault. I couldn't get the other guy off. I don't want to mention his name. Yeah. In time, they just kept coming up with issues, and I just couldn't get him off. I'm very sorry. He said, I appreciate your honesty. And then they did the rehearsal and it went great. And the show was absolutely phenomenal. And then it came to what was the next show? Chicago or LA? I guess Chicago was next. And then it came to 2000, probably the next one would have been Jersey. So they did all three. And now look at him. He's more popular than ever. People, his radio show is fabulous from me to you. And he knows his stuff and he was there.
I know. He's really, a fantastic interview.
He is.
He's very candid.
He knows everybody. He just knows the entire everybody in the entertainment business. Oh, I know them. Barbara Streisand. Oh yeah, Joni was at the house last week, and that kind of stuff. And it's just he's well connected and deservedly so.
He's had the most extraordinary career. If all he did was Peter and Gordon, that would be enough for most people, I think. But life as a producer, working at Apple, and
working for a guy named James and Linda somebody, not too shabby. And then he's produced everybody. Ringo, Barbara Streisand, Diana Ross, just the Elton, just so many people. So it's a wonderful career he's had, and we're glad he's part of the Beatles circle now, and it's wonderful. And so you want to give me some more names because I want to tell you about Norman Hurricane Smith. Oh,
you can talk about him right now. I had the chance to interview him just because he was at the fest. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he wrote the book, the first edition of the book, which I'm sure you have, the hardcover. He wrote it it was only 500 copies made, and it was all for the fest. And afterwards, I said, after a few months later, he was going to come to Chicago, but he got ill. But I said, you got to make there's things missing in the book. Like you started explaining things. By the time you finished, I couldn't understand where he was going. If you remember that part of the book, which is like a lot of rambling because he never did a book. He said, Mark, send me a list of questions and I'll answer them and we'll put in the next volume, which he did. But what I'm proudest about is I asked him if he would play if he would sing Obey What Would You Say on our stage. And he said, I'd be honored to. And he got up there. He was 81 or 82 at that point. And Liverpool was backing him. And he was note perfect, absolutely note perfect. And during the middle part, his wife came up and they were dancing while the instrumental part was going on. It was just a magical moment. And he told us this is only the second time he performed it in his life. The only time he ever played it was on this little TV show called The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So that's Johnny Carson and the Fest and Beatlefest. That's the only two times he performed the song.
That's incredible. Yeah, I have a copy of the book.
Yeah.
It is kind of difficult to read because it bounces around a lot time-wise.
Right.
So
exactly.
You kind of wish everything was more chronological, and it's hard to follow, but it's
The
still.
second one was better. I think he had some help on the second one, but he wasn't a writer. He was a producer.
Right.
So this wasn't, and he just decided to write the book. And by the time he got this thought pattern, and by the time he got to the end of it, what was that thought pattern? I don't know. I can't figure out what he just said. 4 pages. Okay, let's go back. But yes, but he's a sweetheart. And we got a chance to know him. We had lunch with him the Monday after the fest with he and his wife, and he was married 62 years. And so I said, what's the secret of being married so long? And he leaned over me and said, I don't listen.
Boy, you think it might be the other way around. You should listen.
That's what he said.
Huh.
I'm just going to leave it there.
Yeah.
Both.
But that's another thing. I'm so grateful that I got to meet him. It was all because you had him at the fest, And then I think it was, it was one of the last interviews he ever gave was to me.
Oh yeah, he had to cancel Chicago because he wasn't feeling well, and then he also died that year.
Yeah,
maybe next year, the latest. It wasn't long at all, but yeah, I've had been privileged enough to meet just about everybody involved with the Beatles story,
Hmm.
except Brian. I've met all the
Except
Beatles,
who?
except Brian.
Oh, okay.
67,
Hmm.
kids in college.
Sure.
But I've met everybody, just about everybody involved with the story, and you get I think the biggest thing I come away with is that they had great people working for them. Everybody was totally loyal to them and knew what they had to do and what their position was and how to make this thing, how to make it so that the Beatles didn't have to worry about other things except creating the music, the greatest music ever created. And however it worked out, these two kids from Liverpool, Mal and Neil, what do they know, right? They were key. Neil was never a guest, but I did meet him a number of times. But Mal was a guest. Mal paid me the greatest compliment I ever had in my life. He was a guest in '75.
Yep.
He was. We didn't tape the shows then, so I don't know what he said on stage. I don't remember. I could have been running around doing other things while he was on stage. I just don't remember. But we're watching Sunday night. We were showing Magical Mystery Tour, and he's telling me stories while we're watching the movie. I only remember one of them. They were totally unknown at the time. But the only one I remember, and everybody knows it now, is the story where he and Paul says, let's go to France. I want to film Fool on the Hill.
Right.
So he's leaning over while the movie's on. So Paul said, we got to go to France to do this. And so we went, and no passports, no money. I'm with Paul McCartney. Okay, come on in. I guess they had to take a photographer. I didn't even ask. It didn't make sense. So they went there and said, Mark, it was so chilly up there. We were freezing up there, and we really had to do it very quickly. So it wasn't a lot. Well, they didn't spend a lot of time there. Then they came right back. But he told me like 3 or 4 other stories, and I don't remember them. But he was signing autographs. I guess he was signing program books because what else was he going to sign? He wasn't on the records, right? So at the end of the weekend, he said, Mark, this was the greatest weekend of my life, and I thank you for it. He was someone who was always in the background. Nobody knew him, really. Nobody knew. We knew about him. Nobody knew him, but his job was to take care of his boys. That was his job, and he did it wonderfully. And when he tells me that, I'm saying to myself, I would trade 100 of my weekends for this one of his.
And that was in '75, so that was shortly before he was killed.
Oh, he told me he was writing the book. He was almost finished with the book, and he wants to come to all the fests. And I called him Christmas week, and had a nice talk with him. And then like a week later, boom. So, and then they showed the picture they showed in Rolling Stone was him signing autographs at Beatlefest. And my brother happened to be sitting next to him for some reason. I think May Pang is in it.
Yeah.
And, but that's the picture they used for his obituary.
Now, I know I've asked you this question before, but you were just talking about recording interviews and all. Is there any chance that we could ever see any of these archival interviews from the past and maybe have some kind of DVD release of, because so many historic people.
Yeah, well, we've sort of gotten some of them in order. We started putting them in order last winter. And I guess I just have to keep working on this book I started a long time ago, and will it get done? Yes, I think so. Yeah, the girls want me to get it done, and I have been working on a little bit by writing up special things about each artist, each guest. But I have a long way to go, and running a business takes a lot of time.
I know.
It's a hands-on business, folks.
If you normally have 2 fests to run a year, I mean, I think most people don't realize you're working on this all year round.
Oh yeah, yeah. Look, it's like November. I'm already working on the Jersey Fest. You know, we have the great lineup of guests, which I can reveal now because it's
Okay.
on our website, of course. But first time guests, Greg Bissonette. He's going to be really good because he's so tight with Ringo, and he's a really nice guy. We've met him a few times.
He was on the
Billy J.
virtual
Kramer.
fest. He was on the virtual one.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Because
We
Tom
got to see how.
Frangione interviewed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, he was terrific.
Hmm.
Billy J. Kramer is coming back. He's a regular, and of course, his loss of love of his life, Ronnie, last month. He's having a hard time right now, and I've been talking to him pretty regularly and say, you got to get out and work.
Mhm.
So he knows that, and he agrees, and he's doing some things. And whatever he wants to do with the fest, we're completely open. If he wants to just sit at the table, if he wants to just play some music, whatever he wants, whatever he feels comfortable, we want to just be there for him.
Yeah.
Mark Rivera, Lawrence Juba, two guys, top of their profession. Horn player, guitar player.
Yep.
Who's better than those two? And when they get on a jam, no. And they both have that sense that Billy had. There's not all the great musicians have that. They each all three of them have that sense. That's how they got involved with Beatles.
Right.
Because there was, they sensed. I mean, Lawrence Juba, you see him playing guitar. He's not thinking, well, let me try this. It flows out of him. Billy flows out of him. Billy came up for the jams with us numerous times. And Mark Rivera, whatever it needs to do, take it away, Mark, and he'll do a solo.
Yep.
Not everybody can do that.
You're just mesmerized. I'm mesmerized by those people.
Yeah, we need to rehearse. No, they don't rehearse. They don't rehearse, guys. They come and the songs that Liverpool picks, that's what they do. And it's
I will tell you one thing, one of my great joys in going to the fest is if I see Lawrence Juba perform, and there are a lot of people in the audience who never saw him before, and they're just completely wowed by him.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you watch younger generations appreciate Paul or Ringo when they're live, and you enjoy that as much as the concert itself. But I love seeing, other fans being turned on by Lawrence's music, and Mark Rivera is tremendous. I mean, he wouldn't be with Billy Joel all these years.
That's right.
If he wasn't.
For sure. And we have a new guest. Well, we have Chris O'Dell, which was a last minute addition. She was on the roof. So I wanted to get tie in some guests from the Let It Be sessions. And we are working on others too at this moment. Don Danneman. He was a founding member of the Circle.
Right.
And he has some great stories that nobody heard before. And he was actually toured with the Beatles in '66. So he was there at Candlestick Park, the last concert.
Right. The Circle's been together for a few years now. They reunited, although the other main member of the group passed away, Tom Dawes. But Don Danneman's been carrying it, carrying their legacy with other.
His manager is part of the band.
Yep.
He's part of the band. And they'll be there. They'll do the two big hits, and they'll do a couple of Beatles songs with Liverpool.
Right.
And Liverpool provide all the backing harmonies for their songs, as they always do. And looking forward to having him. He'll be there on the Sunday. And we are working on a bunch and the Weaklings will be there, of course. And we are working on other guests that we'll be announcing as we go forward.
Okay. Two last things before we close. How did Liverpool get involved? How did that whole
Jonathan Rapullo wrote me a letter in 1970. I have it right in this drawer, right over here, on the other side of the screen, which I still have, and said they'd like to audition. So Carol and I went to see them in in Westchester. It's a school. One word.
Rye.
College.
I don't know. Oh, college.
Come on, you live close to there.
I don't know everything
in
that area.
It's a school that people know. Okay. Come on. I can.
We'll come up with it after this interview ends.
Okay. But anyway, we went.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of them were 20, 78, 19, 20, 18, 19, 20 years old. And there was just something about it we really liked. So they played in 79 was their first Beatlefest. And they're part of the fabric of the fest.
Sure.
And the way again, as I told before about Ronnie, they backed the Gessler, they backed up Peter and Gordon. They backed up everybody, they backed up Donovan. Donovan did a whole concert, right?
Yeah.
A full concert. And it was just absolutely incredible. They backed up Chad and Jeremy a bit, but they mostly a duo. They don't really have they did some backing. But all the guests we've had over the years, even Klaus, I think once, maybe twice, performed a little bit on our stage. We didn't even get into Klaus, but Klaus is a very special human being and also has that ability that we talk about with Billy and Lawrence and Mark. There's not that many have it, but Klaus is one of them. And
he's a jewel.
When he described how with Imagine and with All Things Must Pass, the thing that had it's the same band that did those two albums. Not Imagine, the Plastic Ono band. Sorry,
right.
But Imagine they did too. But they never told us what to do. They're part of a band. It's not like you play this, try this, try this. That was as they were doing it, but we had complete freedom to put in what we want. That's why they wanted us there. When Ringo and Klaus with the bottom of both of those albums, right? And neither George nor John, they had the same philosophy. And George still used to say, I just want to be in a band. I don't want to be the leader. I just want to be in a band. And it was magic. And Klaus is Ringo puts the beat down and it works. He knows what they just feel it. And Klaus was the same way. All right. So they couldn't get Paul, so they got Klaus, right? And it's a different style, but who knew the top two bass players you'll ever see were right there.
It's all instinctual. They know what to play. You don't have to spend hours and hours rehearsing. They just know. And the Beatles feel it and they know it. That's why they call on these people.
Yeah. And when they were together as a foursome, they work out the songs themselves on a lot of it. George Martin would come in and say, why don't you try adding a different instrument or whatever? But the guitar parts, George would work on and come back with it. And Ringo just feels what he feels. And same thing with Paul, with the bass. They just come up with it. But George wanted to work on something to add to make the song better.
Right.
And it was very much all four of them doing it. We could talk for hours about this, but what else would you like to say?
There's one last question here. Other than the obvious of the Beatles themselves, who is one person you've never had at the fest that you want more than anybody else? Oh, by the way, I should know this. Have you had Jim Keltner?
No.
Okay. Because he would be way at the top of the list.
He's a way at the top, but we've tried. We've tried. And he's like it's like Jeff Lynne. He's a Ringfield. So I'd love to have Jeff Lynne, love to have Keltner. I have other names that I'd like to get that maybe after COVID, maybe one of them will pop. The top. I'm top of the topper. I'm looking for like Eric Clapton and Elton John, James Taylor, people like that. Whether it happens or not, I don't know.
All you can do is try.
I've looked at all the guests I've had. Peter Noon and Mickey Dolenz, and Donovan. Yeah, I guess Donovan probably the biggest guest we've had, in my opinion. My favorite. They just love him, and Billy Preston, of course. But so many. It's just the list goes on and on of guests that we've had over the years, and it's always nice having the musical guests because when they play on stage, they do their hits. It's just.
I know. Haven't you told me that when Donovan performed Atlantis, that was like One of the greatest moments of your life for you.
I did. I said, would you please perform? Would you mind performing Atlantis for me? He said, I'd love to. So he did.
Hmm.
Meadowlands. That was the first one.
Oh,
He
yeah.
did it there back in 2003. And then he comes up at our party and he brings his guitar and he's playing guitar for hours at a time. And Mark, you want to try my guitar? His green guitar. Yeah, he's so sweet. He really is. He's a very special person. A special person in the Beatles' lives.
Yeah.
And
Well,
he's a great storyteller.
Yep.
Right? So we haven't even scratched the surface of our guests, but there you are.
yeah, we should have more storytelling from Donovan, because Peter Asher is like at the top of the list. He was born to do storytellers. He's VH1 had their series storytellers. He is such a great storyteller himself.
Because he knows everything. He was there.
I know.
He was there. Yeah.
He is such a joy.
Stories. It's still his best story.
Yeah.
I want to hold your hand, right? That's you can't get bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know it till he told the story. Knew.
Right.
He's been telling it for what, 10 years maybe now? I lost track, but it hasn't been like we didn't know it 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right.
He told it. It's like one of the, how could you get better than that? The song that blew up the planet in the right direction.
And for anyone that's never seen Peter live, I couldn't recommend anybody more, because all the stories he has to tell, you never get tired of hearing them, even if you've seen him many times. And he's either with someone like Jeremy or Albert Lee, or when he was with Gordon, he's always with somebody interesting to share the stage with. And
Sister Kate. Yeah, we haven't been to a concert since COVID, but we went to the Cutting Room, not the Cutting, the City Winery a few months back. We saw Peter with a 9-piece band. Albert Lee was there, and Sister Kate was in it.
Steve Holly.
Steve Holly was there. Yeah. All our buddies. People have all been to the fest, and it's good to see everybody. It was nice to be out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Billy J and Ronnie were there also.
So I want to remind everybody that the fest, fingers crossed, toes crossed, will be happening April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd next year at the Hyatt Regency, New Jersey City. And if anybody needs more information about that, you can just go to thefest.com. And I'd love to have you on more often here, Mark, because we haven't even scratched the surface.
You're right. I'll scratch my head while I scratch the surface. But yeah, and it's going to be, everyone's concerned about safety. That's why we didn't do the shows, because we were concerned about safety. So we will hope everybody is vaccinated. We will assume everybody will be. If they're not, we'll have to figure that out by beginning of January. We'll see where the world is, and that hopefully we'll get up past the herd immunity that was talked about a year ago, and with all the kids getting vaccinated. I was concerned about the kids, because if they can't get vaccinated, how do parents bring the kids? They're exposing everybody else. So now, hopefully, we won't have to wear masks all the time. We don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see, but we'll do it right, because our health and the health of everyone at the fest, and family and friends and everybody there, that counts more. But
yeah,
we're revved up to do it now, so we don't want to stop it. And peace and love, everybody.
Yes.
And
Mark,
good talking to you.
Yeah, thanks
It's been
so
a while.
much
We haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah,
We've seen all these events.
That's all because of COVID.
Every Beatle related event, Ken is there, and I'm there.
Yeah, but
and we see lots of you listeners and all the viewers. So
yes, and thank you to you for all the incredible entertainment you've given us all these years. It's quite a remarkable achievement. It is really something when you think about it, when you start doing this and you have no idea this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
It's 47 years. It's been my life's work, and who knew? But working when I first met John in '69, I shook his hand and said, "I want to work for the Beatles," and who knew that selling Beatles records to Sam Goody would lead me to an idea that involves all this, and authors. How many authors? Hundreds of authors have written books. They show up, and and new information keeps coming on, and
all the time.
it's getting better all the time, and it's more books to read, and got to get caught up because I'm a slow reader anyway, but I'm always working. I'm
Yeah.
almost finished with this one. Did you read this
Okay.
one?
Yeah, I interviewed Ashley Kahn on my
This is
channel
one.
here.
I only have a few more pages to go. I love this because it's all George.
Mhm.
It's his own words. So you're not, there's no interpretation here. You're just reading it, and when I'm reading it, I hear George's voice
Right.
talking about it.
It's
And it's
pure transcriptions.
pure transcriptions, and that's,
Yeah.
and as much as I read as many things I can, there are things that I never read.
Right.
You can't, nobody could read all of them. Maybe Mark Lewison can.
Yeah. That book, by the way, is called Harrison on Harrison. There was a similar book that came out several years ago, Lennon on Lennon,
Yes.
which was all transcriptions too of his
Yes.
interviews.
Mhm.
Apart
Yes.
from all the stuff that Yoko has put out in the box sets of
Right.
all these interviews and interview clips from various interviews. It's nothing like reading it from their own words.
Yes, absolutely. Terrific.
So Mark,
That note,
thanks so much for joining us.
take care.
And
Take
anytime
care.
you want to come back, and maybe we'll do this right before the fest starts. Something.
You never know.
Okay.
I like your setup behind you.
Oh yeah. Everybody that I interview on my podcast, they all have a similar setup behind them.
Well,
It's
this
all
is my old
CDs.
one, right? All my stuff is home, but I just have a little setup behind me where I turn around and look and stuff.
You got
It's
all the right stuff.
The whole office is all Beatles. Everything in this room, all the cabinets and everything, 100% Beatles, because it's a Beatles office.
Okay. Maybe
And I've been here
someday you'll.
40 years in the same spot. How's that?
Okay.
40,
Very
exactly
good.
40 years in this one office space in Westwood, New Jersey.
Well, thank you for all the work you've done in that spot.
Okay, Ken. Good talking to you. And if we don't see you beforehand, we will see you at the fest.
Yes, you will.
Don't miss it this year. We're going to have a lot of surprises, and we'll get to them at some point.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks so
night.
much for joining
morning.
us, and thanks to all of you for watching. Please subscribe if you can to the channel, and we'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.